It is Thursday, August 26th here in Draft Shark Studios in Rochester, New York. Welcome to the podcast. I am your host, Matt Schauf. With me tonight is Mike Shope, of course, of WGR in Buffalo and the Deep End podcast with Adam Krautwurst. Mike is with me tonight because we're going to be watching Jared take his shot at the $500K grand prize in the FFPC main event. That draft has just gotten underway. Mike, are you ready to watch this thing play out?
Yes, I am very excited. I cannot believe it. I am now living my life in such a way that during the day I look forward to watching drafts at night.
I'm sure your wife is happy about this development, right?
Oh, she can't say enough about it. Yeah, loves it.
I know my wife is happy when I'm doing several 2-hour live streams at night a week, right ahead of football season when things get really busy. It's a real wife-pleasing time of year.
Oh, they love us somehow anyway. Doesn't really make sense to me.
That's right. Well, let's make it count, and let's start looking at the players. Of course, I mentioned Jared has taken a shot here. He's competing in this draft. He is at number 11, just like our pal Kevin English was on Monday night. So Jared's pick has not come up yet, but we are already 7 picks in. The draft is a minute old. It started with Christian McCaffrey, as they all do. It was Dalvin Cook at the second spot, then Travis Kelce, Alvin Kamara, Darren Waller, Zeke Elliott, Derrick Henry. Mike, are you at all, I guess surprised wouldn't be the word, but would you expect Travis Kelce to go 2 more often than Dalvin Cook in these tight end premium drafts at this point?
I think it's really close, Matt. I think you see it sometimes. I have a main event where I'm third, and I'm sort of hoping for Kelce at that point. My partner looks at it differently. But, what you have here maybe so far is Waller. It's a little high for Waller, but it's also not unprecedented. So you're seeing a lot of the same things here. I think Kelce is reasonable at even 1-1, but certainly 1-2. And who do you think Jared wants? Do you know? Is it Tyreek? Is it? Yeah, well.
We just had it answered. I would bet that he was hoping Aaron Jones was going to get there. And then after that, it's kind of, I got to take the wide receiver over the running backs left.
Now, Matt, I don't want to misstep. Like, how should this work? Should we not call out names? I have a little bit of an impulse to call out names. I'm training for bare knuckle. So when I watch these on my own, that's how I do it. But I don't want to, commit a foul.
I am absolutely fine with you calling out names. If we were watching our own Draft Sharks war room and saying, this is the next guy, this is who Jared's going to pick in 3 spots, that might be a little poor etiquette. But I think just guessing who the player is going to be at any spot, I'm totally okay with it.
Okay. Well, Barkley, 2 nights ago, Adam Krautwurst and I had Abib Agbatoba on, and he's like, anytime in round 2 for Barkley. I watched one last night where Barkley went 202, and this makes him running back 8, right? So what do you think? Like, there were other options. He didn't go. Ridley went in front of him. That's it. The guy behind him is going 2 wide receivers. That could be interesting tonight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's especially interesting to watch in this format where you only have to start 2 wideouts. You already started with one of those top shelf guys. I think it's at least as much a signal of not being comfortable with the running backs that are still there at that spot and feeling like Stephon Diggs and Calvin Ridley are a safer base on which to build that team, which that I can get behind. I don't – it's tough to get comfy with the running backs that are right there. I am a little bit surprised that Jared took Saquon Barkley, even at 202. I agree with what Abib said. I'm fine with Barkley anywhere in round 2 because obviously if everything does break his way, he has top 3 upside at the position. So the reason I'm a little surprised is that Jared really wanted to make Saquon Barkley the first round bust. He was fighting us, and I don't mind revealing that at this point. Just so you know, Saquon Barkley is not that player, but you have to go check out the article to see who it is. So
okay.
Jared's been uncomfortable with Saquon Barkley, so I'm a little bit surprised that he made the leap on him there with some of the running backs that are still left.
Well, I have a lot of respect for Jared. He knows a lot. I'm just getting into this, and there's no doubt the industry sees him as a big mind. But is he somebody who could be swayed? Like, there's been a little bit of Barkley momentum there, even today. On the practice field, Barkley was like, yeah, I'm good. He's sort of practicing for real now. And who would he have taken instead? Like a Taylor is somebody of the names we see, Gibson, Taylor, Harris. Maybe Taylor probably has by a little bit the highest ADP.
I think there are 2 main things at play here. One is that because this is a tournament, he's not just trying to beat these 11 teams. He's trying to win the whole thing. he's shooting for ultimate upside and sees a higher ultimate ceiling for Saquon Barkley than the rest of the running backs left. The other thing I wonder, I don't know for sure, but I wonder if at some level, even subconsciously, Jared's like, I have already taken too much Joe Mixon. He cannot be a guy I also rely on in this spot.
Yeah, and that's really interesting to me in that you have a lot of overlap, names of people doing multiple drafts. And I think you see that a lot. Like they're drafting based on who they haven't already picked, which makes sense. I mean, you would want that for your own portfolio. Most of these guys do. But there's a little bit of plus EV in that for the others when you see, I mean, there are tiers and it's a very slight difference, but you might get opportunities based on, well, the guy next to me has drafted Joe Mixon 10 times and Barkley no times. So he's going to do this time. Like, it doesn't seem like an optimal, in a vacuum, one draft for your life, you wouldn't do it that way, but those sort of variances occur.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that's changed for me in drafting over the past couple of years is it used to be just I'm building this team. This is what I'm focused on right now. This is the best player at this spot. Now there's definitely a little bit more of the exposure question. And if I have a lot of a guy already and he's going a lot earlier now, then I'm a little bit more prone to back off drafting him and say, I've got some shares. If he goes off, I'm going to benefit from it somewhere else. Here, I'm going to follow where things are and maybe get exposure to somebody else. Now, before I get too far removed from what I said about Jared, maybe that's not what he's thinking. And we're going to have him on toward the end of this draft. He's going to jump in. He can answer these questions for us directly. Maybe it's strictly the upside thing. And Barkley versus Mixon, he just is chasing the ceiling on Barkley and sees Mixon as a higher floor but a lower ceiling player. So I'll be curious to see what he says about that. But yeah, I definitely, the whole exposure and shares and all that is not something that was in my draft approach for years and years. And then over the past few, as there's become more best ball and just higher volume drafting, it's a real consideration. It might push you the wrong way at times when you're deciding between players, but it's definitely a real consideration when you have money invested in various places.
Yeah, that I understand that. That makes sense. So looking at round 2, Matt, a little bit of a slide for Kittle. Not unprecedented to see that, but last night I watched a draft at 1. The player at 1 got McCaffrey and Kittle. 3 in a row, 2 running back teams, and then you have what? You have 2 teams without a running back through 2 rounds. Isn't it interesting how that debate has just caught fire in fantasy, where you're the different philosophies about when is too many running backs is really just, I don't know, that's the thing right now in fantasy, it seems.
It really is, and it seems to be across formats. And it's worth noting here for anybody that's not familiar with the format, FFPC tight end premium, so 1.5 PPR per tight end, but 1 point per reception for everybody else. You start 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 1 tight end. There are 2 flex spots, so that can be a running back, wide receiver, or a tight end. Wide receivers have been getting pushed up in drafts in general. You see it more in best ball drafts. The running backs have been controlling the early rounds, but that has changed a little bit lately, and I think you're seeing some more values get to rounds 3 and 4, although from the little bit, and I haven't watched many of these main event drafts yet. I watched the one Monday night. They're not the same guys that were slipping to round 4 in, say, underdog drafts not that long ago are not slipping to round 4 in these drafts. So I think when there's big money on the line and you're drafting a team that you're going to manage, the running backs rebound a little bit. So we'll see where that goes here. And I think that the fact that you only have to start 2 wideouts a week changes things a little bit as well. Just to recap some of the picks, the specific players, we did have Devontae Adams, then Aaron Jones, then Tyreek Hill was Jared's first-round pick, Stephon Diggs, Calvin Ridley around the turn, Saquon Barkley to Jared, then DeAndre Hopkins, Antonio Gibson, Jonathan Taylor, Najee Harris, Nick Chubb, DK Metcalf, Justin Jefferson, Joe Mixon, A.J. Brown, George Kittle, Terry McLaurin around that 2-3 turn. As you mentioned, the Monday night draft that Kevin was in, Mike, we saw the Christian McCaffrey drafter take McCaffrey, and then I think it was at least 4 straight pass catchers. I don't remember if it was more beyond that, but it was definitely at least 4 to 5 straight pass catchers after McCaffrey.
You see that a lot, for sure. I can think of 1 or 2 right there goes one in Allen Robinson that are just ripe right now. How does Jared do these, Matt? Is he alone in a room? How does he like
sure.
to? Is he? Is he listening? Is he watching?
I don't know. You know what? I'm not sure. I wouldn't bet either way. I wouldn't be surprised if he has us on, but I also wouldn't be surprised if he has us off because he hears my voice so much during the week that he's probably like, I got to do this draft without hearing Matt's voice.
Well, there might be another stream of this draft. I don't know. Robert Woods has really, here he is at 3.7, and he is solid right there. He goes in this range a lot lately. And I've never really known. I mean, last year it was hard to know Woods versus Kupp. Now you have a new quarterback there. You're going to have a different running game there with Akers. That would have been a little bit different. I mean, Henderson. But it's Woods has been very solid. He's getting up there a little bit. I am sort of a little skittish about Robert Woods in the mid-third. You have Cooper on the board, right? You'd have a couple of other interesting choices.
Yeah,
the fourth. It's also tight end. The tight end position is so pivotal in these, and depending on how Jared feels about 5 and 6, he'll have options here if that's how he wants to build it. What do you think he'll do?
I could see him going tight end here. I would not be surprised by that. I think there's a big enough gap between where George Kittle went and Jared's spot here that especially if the next tight end makes it around that 3-4 turn, I could see it going to his team. I don't think he'll take it here in the third round because I think that he'll expect Kyle Pitts will be the next tight end off the board. And I don't think that would be his specific target. So while we're talking tight ends, you mentioned Darren Waller going a little earlier than usual. I wonder if this week and maybe a little bit before that is kind of the rebound spot for him because we saw early FFPC drafting. He was regularly going in the first round, and then he started camp not on the field. We eventually found out it was an ankle issue, I believe, but he's back on the field. So with that, I mean, maybe he's solidly back in round 1 in these drafts, wouldn't you think?
Definitely. I mean, there was a little bit of concern there. It was never clear, like you said, about what his problem was. You kind of think like, as much as the NFL might not like to do it this way, if there's an injury, they will tell you at least it's an injury. And John Gruden would not do that in the case of Waller at least once. So Pitts is not Jared's style. Cooper Kupp is. We've talked about him on these a lot. Adam loves him. And there's also a future Hall of Famer on the board that I don't know how Jared feels, but I think if it's Matt, I know what he would do.
Yeah, I think Mike Evans is always going to go later than Adam thinks he should. I guess it's tough to argue against liking Mike Evans, but the issues we've talked about on here too, the target share did not work in his favor. He was a big winner on efficiency last year. It's a little bit tough to see it going the same way. I agree with what you were saying on Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp. I like Robert Woods. I like Cooper Kupp. It's tough to be strongly on one of them over the other one because either could lead the other in targets. Cooper Kupp could certainly beat Robert Woods in touchdowns, which he has done over the past few years. Robert Woods is a better bet for yardage. So if somebody were asking me to lay $100 down on either finishing over the other, I would feel terrible about making that bet.
Yeah, it's a tough call. Well, Hawkinson for Jared after Tyler Lockett at 401. That's a tick high for Lockett, but it's not bad. And then you have Hawkinson, who's going in the, well, according to Fantasy Mojo, tight end 5, average position in the last 3 days, 401. So he's right there. It's all about build, isn't it? When you are down in that range or any range, I guess, and when you do tight end. At this point, you have Evans and then Andrews, and now there'll be a gap at that position. So these guys in the middle and team 2, team 4 without tight ends are going to have to scramble a little bit eventually.
Yeah, and TJ Hawkinson is who I expected Jared to take in round 4. That's who I had in mind when I said I don't think he'll take a tight end here because he expects Kyle Pitts to be the one to go at the turn because Kyle Pitts is the 4th tight end in these drafts all the time. I don't know if I've watched an FFPC draft where he was not the 4th. If he wasn't the 4th, it was because he went in the top 3. So I think he took a mild chance that TJ Hawkinson got back around. And I mean, along with the build, I think Hawkinson specifically is a guy that we're betting on seeing a ton of targets this year. He was over 100 last year, and then all the wide receivers left town like they found the Mayflower and were heading to a new place where they could, practice freely. Hawkinson could lead this position in targets. I think that's within – I'm not betting on that. I think that's within the ultimate range of possibilities. I think he could have the kind of season that Darren Waller has had the past couple of years for the Raiders.
Yeah, me too. I'm fine there. I think, Pitts does seem to be favored over Hawkinson, but I think there's an argument either way. And then you have the Andrews team in the 9 spot. Like that I like Andrews too. Like, I'm not saying that that's a reach per se, but like right in here is where you're deciding, or at least to that point, Matt, is where you're deciding, do I want to get tight end over with? Like, if you look at Godwin, DJ Moore is one of my favorites. He'll never come back to Jared. And like, he would be the one for me in this range that hasn't gone yet. You have such high ceiling options at wide receiver. So, okay, Andrews, it seems like it comes down to what I want with tight end, how I want to build my team. And, either way is fine. But that's, I think, the choice there for team 9 in this case.
I feel much better about the target outlooks for Kyle Pitts and TJ Hawkinson than Mark Andrews, but I think the biggest mark in Mark Andrews' favor at this point is if you don't take him, to a lot of people, it probably gets pretty ugly. I like Noah Fant better than where ADP tends to like him, so I would probably pass on Mark Andrews there, but I can understand saying, no, I want to get Mark Andrews and then not have to worry about where my tight end scoring is coming from.
There was Noah Fant injury news today, by the way. He should be fine for the opener, I'm reading, but there is some sort of leg issue. Who knows? It's tough this time of year to know how to translate.
Yeah, great. I hadn't even had time to catch up on that.
You know whose name we don't see yet? Darrell Henderson.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course. But he was going late 3rd, early 4th until the Sony Michel trade. And so Henderson, James Robinson, those are interesting names here as these guys. I mean, you have to be on top of it and try to move with the news. In the last 48 hours, we've had a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially in those backfields. I'm definitely not surprised that we haven't seen Darrell Henderson come off the board yet. I'll be looking to see when he does come off the board. I'm a little bit more surprised that we haven't seen James Robinson yet, because I think we're in the range where he makes plenty of sense, and we have a bunch of teams that have several pass catchers and 1-0 running backs. I mean, you talked about the team next to Jared starting with 2 wideouts. They then took 2 straight pass catchers again, Kyle Pitts and Tyler Lockett around that turn. You mentioned Lockett, it's wide receiver 16. That's maybe a tiny bit early, but I like it, and I think that he's a value at ADP to this point. So we've got 4 straight pass catchers on that team. That's the only team with no running backs right now. Jared is one of 3-4 other teams that have just 1 running back to this point. Then we had Mike Evans. So we had Hawkinson go to Jared, Mike Evans, Mark Andrews, Chris Godwin, Deontay Johnson, DJ Moore, Miles Sanders, Patrick Mahomes, and then T. Higgins. Mike, I wonder if team 3 that already had Travis Kelce and Clyde Edwards-Helaire was disappointed to see Mahomes come off the board, the pick before his 4th rounder.
Maybe. So far, 2 Chiefs, 2 Bengals as it happens. But, maybe this is about the range. Would you ever pick Mahomes in this case to block somebody from building a team like that, or maybe only if it's the Chiefs, or would you ever do that?
I would never use that as my motivation for it. I might make the pick and like that it did that to the team, but I certainly wouldn't take him if I would prefer somebody else without that factor. Because I think if I'm playing defense against another team, then I'm probably ultimately hurting the upside of my team.
Yeah. Mahomes, quarterback is so interesting right now. And really the driving the engine in there is Lance and Fields, and even Hurts in a way, like how these relatively, to varying degrees, unknown rushing quarterbacks, without knowing the status, of course, will they play week 1? One reason to skip Mahomes is those guys, where you think you have a chance at coming close to that kind of production 10 rounds later. That's kind of appealing. But Mahomes. So it's an interesting choice that teams have to make here, whether they want the elite quarterback. You get to a point, you see him go later and later. Here's 4.9. According to Mojo, his average is 4.2 of late. So you get to a point where you feel like maybe you can't resist, but it does probably, like, that guy's done at that position for the night, I would think. It takes you out of contention, so to speak, for players like Lance and Fields. It's tough.
Yeah, no, I think it's plenty late to take Mahomes. We saw him in round 3 in ADP, even in FFPC drafting early. And like you just said, that this is beyond his current ADP. So I think it's a fine spot, especially if you're not high on T. Higgins, Julio Jones, James Robinson, Brandon Ayuk, David Montgomery, the next 5 players to go. I have no problem with taking Mahomes there. What I would not do that the next team did is take Joe Mixon and T. Higgins on the same team, because I don't think that the Bengals are capable of providing ultimate ceiling to both of those players this season.
Yeah. Yeah. The key thing I keep thinking about with Cincinnati is the implied point total per game for their season, which is very low in the league. And so if Vegas thinks you're 20 points a game, how many of your guys do I want to draft in the first 5 rounds? But there'll be one more in this round, almost definitely. And I think it's a guy Jared likes.
I don't know. Not as much as you might think, I guess. I think he likes the player, but not necessarily the situation for this year.
Okay.
And of course, Jamar Chase, who we're talking about. I think anybody watching knows that Jamar Chase is coming up pretty soon, but I doubt that Jared is hoping that Chase gets to him at this point. What do you think, Mike? Would you put Joe Mixon and T. Higgins on the same team? And I guess if you did, if maybe it weren't a plan, if it's just the way that the values ended up aligning, would you then say, okay, if these guys are both going to work out, then I should go ahead and take Joe Burrow to make sure that if this offense does shockingly shoot the moon, I'm going to maximize the scoring that I get from it?
Yeah, I would definitely want Burrow. I might overreact to it. And sometimes I'll get caught thinking like, oh, yeah, well, I've got 2 guys in the same team in this situation, running back, wide receiver. What am I going to do next? Just maybe more. I'm trying to break this habit, be more sort of a slave to projections and ADP and like, okay, well, this is the pick. But you always have options. I mean, Burrow does not give you rushing. And the point about the Bengals and their projections on offense as a team is a concern. So I guess I would avoid it. You guys are like the Mixon group, right? It always seems to be about Mixon. And, I'm not quite as devout when it comes to him. But, I guess to answer your question, I would say I wouldn't avoid it as a rule. Mm-hmm. But all else equal, I would try to, Ayuk maybe. Not Judy. Judy is shooting up. Maybe Julio. That team has 2 Titan receivers right now, so watch for that. I guess I would avoid it all else equal, but it's not like a hard and fast rule.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that where you really make a mistake is if it makes you reach to get that quarterback. If you take Joe Burrow as QB 10, that's a mistake. I think where I might, let it sway me a little bit is if I get to the point where 12 quarterbacks are gone, Joe Burrow's the next QB, and there's nothing that I have really ahead of him at another position, then it's like, okay, I guess I'll take Joe Burrow because I have already kind of committed to the Bengals surprising on offense. So if they're going to, then they need to have the quarterback lead that charge.
Yeah, and you do really put yourself into a box. I mean, that takes away, or not takes away necessarily, but it changes how you look at other quarterbacks where you see value 2, 3, 4 rounds ahead. And then, if it's those rookies again, it just changes the equation on what you want to do at that position. And I think overall, you'd rather not have that happen, where you think you are stuck with a certain player or you have to rearrange for that player. That's not ideal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think ultimately I would probably not add Joe Burrow to this team because I don't want to be stuck having to rely on these Bengals the rest of the way. And if things do go awesome, then I'm already getting a pretty good chunk of the scoring with Joe Mixon and T. Higgins. I don't need to necessarily triple down with the quarterback. But talking about quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes was the first off the board at 409. Then, as we talked about, T. Higgins, Julio Jones, James Robinson, Brandon Ayuk, David Montgomery, Adam Thielen, Jamar Chase, Jerry Jeudy, Josh Allen in the middle of round 5. And then Kyler Murray at the end of round 5, the next 2 quarterbacks. That for me is the biggest knock on taking Patrick Mahomes, even when quarterbacks slide, is I don't think that there's a gap between Mahomes and Josh Allen and Kyler Murray and even Lamar Jackson and Dak Prescott. So if I can wait another 2 rounds and get guys at running back or wide receiver or in, this format tight end, I'd rather do that and take a shot on Dak Prescott, for example, even if I miss on Dak and then have to take Russell Wilson next round. I think that's a fine fallback. And ultimately, if it doesn't work out, I think there are still options beyond that we'll get to.
Yeah, I think that's correct. I admit there are times when I end up sort of knee-jerking to the quarterback. It happened in a football guy's draft because there were 2 or 3 receivers there that I was sort of facing, and most of the guys I expected to get had been taken. So then I did do that thing, but I think ideally you'd prefer not to. How about Team 12 here, Matt, with 2 tight ends through 6 in front of – you think Jared probably likes that, especially with Hawkinson in his pocket. He probably likes the fact that behind him he probably has a better chance of predicting what could happen in future rounds, or no?
I think he likes it, and I think that he doesn't mind that Kyler Murray went there, and I think he probably likes specifically that Logan Thomas did go there, because that's a guy that Jared and I have talked about a lot lately. We've been down on collectively throughout the offseason, and then watched plenty of smart fantasy analysts that we believe in, like Logan Thomas this year for whatever reasons. Hasn't pushed us to be chasing Logan Thomas, but maybe raising him up a tiny bit into more comfortable bottom of tight end 1 territory rather than just being somebody we're avoiding altogether. That said, he's the tight end 7 here, and he's getting really close to just being that in ADP, and I'm not comfortable with Logan Thomas as the tight end 7 just on average. So if I'm Jared, I'm happy with the way that drafter is doing. That's 6 picks now, no running backs: Stephon Diggs, Calvin Ridley, Kyle Pitts, Tyler Lockett, Kyler Murray, Logan Thomas. Jared, by the way, took 1 running back in round 2. It's Saquon Barkley, who we'll see what his week 1 participation looks like, but that's his only running back through 6 picks. And then the drafter next to him took Aaron Jones and has taken 5 straight wideouts.
Yep, I agree with you on Thomas. I think Boyd was maybe obvious or like a solid favorite to be Jared's pick at 602, not knowing how he feels, but that would have been my guess. Galladay, more injury concerns, and then who knows with Juju, like the 3rd receiver on that team, in my opinion, maybe that's consensus. And I think there's a tier break there. So I think he's probably happy to get Boyd, not knowing how exactly he sees it. Yeah, Thomas, I get the argument. It's a different quarterback, and there are weapons there. The addition of Curtis Samuel, the ascension of Gibson. You still have McKissick. I don't know. I wouldn't want to do that. I feel like I'm the same as you on Thomas. This is why tight end is so important to me in these, because once you get past Andrews, I'm taking a holiday, and it's sometimes it feels forced. Not when you have one already, though. Like that's what the case was here tonight. He already had Pitts on his roster, so that's interesting. What do you think of the running back options as you get into round 6? You're seeing some names go. We're into the rookies, although no more ETN, sadly. Mm-hmm. Is this, like you hear a lot, where you'd want to avoid the position, or maybe Zag versus Zig, you could see yourself adding guys like Davis, or I'm thinking of Gaskin here, who has not been chosen.
Mike Davis is not for me. In round 6, it's fine. I'm not going to argue against doing that any earlier. I would say he's not a good value. Things have certainly gotten better for him in that Atlanta has not picked up anybody else. Sonny Michel got traded elsewhere, so he dodged that bullet. Javian Hawkins got waived today, so we know that he's not going to be a thing. So things look better for Mike Davis now than they did at the beginning of camp, but he's still not going to be somebody that I'm relying on, especially in such a big money tournament where I'm looking for ultimate upside for everybody. I just don't think he's that kind of player. I do think that Javonte Williams and Trey Sermon are those kinds of players. I would have been fine with either of those guys being Jared's pick here. Not that I have anything against Tyler Boyd. And I think that all 4 of his wideouts can start pretty much every week. You mentioned Myles Gaskin. He just went. I felt a lot better about Myles Gaskin before the preseason started. And he opened the first game playing behind Malcolm Brown. Last game, he was splitting with Salvon Ahmed. Brian Flores says it's going to be a committee. So, I mean, at this point, Myles Gaskin's kind of like Mike Davis, where it's like, okay, I'm fine with him here, but I can't get excited because it seems like the Dolphins don't want to use him the way that they did last year.
Yeah, totally. I would not want my 3rd running back to be that kind of predicament. I'd like to see him go after I mention his name, though, because I sort of worry. I worry about everything at this stage of my life. And so maybe I shouldn't have given anything away. I mean, no more than half of these drafters are watching. No more than half. But still, if it's any, it's, maybe a mistake to talk about players.
I think you got to know it's out there at this point. You got to know people. Somebody somewhere is streaming it and talking about it, or at least tweeting or whatever.
No defenses yet. I saw a defense in round 8 last night, I believe.
Really?
And there was one in a different. Are we okay with talking about other, like the competitors or the other drafts that other guys do?
I scrolled it up so that the names aren't showing. So just in case anybody is like, I don't want everybody seeing how I'm drafting. But I think any past drafts, I don't know, it's okay to mention individual picks or if whatever path you're about to head.
I was thinking like who's competition, who's okay to mention. I probably should have cleared that with you guys a year ago. But I know on the Establish the Run main event draft they had on Monday, when Kevin was drafting in a different group on Draft Sharks, there was a team with 4 defenses. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Right? Like, just come on.
That's definitely excessive. I can see 2. Anything beyond that is overkill, and 2 would really depend on who I was drafting and the exact matchups early in the season.
I think their first 2 are in 8 and 9.
Then you completely wasted 8th and 9th round picks, because the only reason you do that is if you think you have a stud defense, which you don't, because there's not such a thing. So anytime that you're taking something like it always surprises me when picks like that happen at this level. I mean, it's such an investment to me. I'm sure there are folks out there who are like, $1,900, I got that in my pocket. Let's do a draft tonight. But that's not me. For me, if I have a team in here, I'm locked in. I'm closing the door. I'm telling the family I'll see him tomorrow.
I remember 2 years ago, I did my first draft that was as high as $300, $300, $350 in that range, like football guys. And I was all just ready. It was so fired up, so locked in, because like that's a lot of money. So I did that draft, and somebody made some oddball pick early, and somebody in the chat said, I guess 350 isn't what it used to be. And I thought, like, yeah. But the more of these you watch, I agree. Like, I'll do a $35 draft just to pass the time, a slow draft through the off season, and you see some wackadoo type things. Then you get into these and you still see them. So there's no necessary correlation between the price point and the efficient models that you see used. I mean, maybe more often than not, but not every time.
Yeah, it still amazes me, though. We talked about some of the running backs that were going in that mid-range and some in the changing backfield situations. James Robinson went at the end of round 4, which seems fair and probably a little bit on the late side for where we should expect him to go in these drafts. David Montgomery at 502. I thought that he had been climbing after a previous fall. 502, he went after Miles Sanders, after James Robinson. I'm not sure exactly how late among running backs that is here, but fairly late, and I think a good second running back for a team that took Dalvin Cook first, then took 3 straight wideouts, and then David Montgomery as a second. That seems like a nice base on which to build a team here to me.
Nobody ever likes Montgomery. The poor guy. Like, he just was a league winner last year, but I don't know. Sure, for that, I agree. 502, okay. I was wondering about Prescott, so I didn't want to say it. And so Jared takes Prescott at 6'11". I thought maybe with Murray on the team behind him, he would try to do that the other way. But that team took 2 tight ends, so who knows? A different situation. But Prescott made it past Rodgers to Jared.
Yeah, I think that at that point I might have just taken a shot that he got past the turn, given that the other drafter took Kyler Murray. But you obviously can't trust it. I mean, we've seen drafters take 2 high-level quarterbacks. And I would imagine what spooked Jared a little bit into going ahead and taking Dak there is that Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers already went off the board. So we're already 6 quarterbacks deep. Dak's the 7th off the board. I mean, he shouldn't be later than 5th, I think. So I think Jared just said, I'm going to go ahead and take him now and not take any chances and be stuck with something much less than that. And I think the other part of that is he clearly didn't love anything else on the board, because around that turn he took Sony Michel. And, I mean, at best, Sony Michel is a guy that you are hopeful for. It's not a guy that you can count on for production this year. So I think Jared is like, I'm going to go the safe route, take Dak because he's well ahead of the next few guys on my board, and then we'll see what happens after that.
Matt, I am shocked. I mean, that's the most interesting pick of this draft, and it's Jared's pick, Sony Michel. I mean, he must be all the way off Henderson, right? I mean, you could be so on the Rams that you think there's going to be a lot for everybody. That I'm shocked by that. He wanted his second running back right there, and a lot of other interesting options had dried up. I mean, that's clear. Gordon, maybe, but I can you defend it? You probably can. I mean, anything Jared does can be defended. I just like that. I am blown away by that.
So I guess in defense, I would say it's the 32nd running back here. So I'm sure that there were some guys who already went that he might prefer to Sony Michel. We were just recording last night with John Daigle of NBC Sports Edge, and Jared clearly is reading the way that the Rams have treated running back over the past couple of years as a lack of confidence in Darrell Henderson. And that, I mean, you can definitely read it that way. They already had Darrell Henderson around when they drafted Cam Akers in round 2. They still had Darrell Henderson around when they made this trade for Sony Michel. Now, we don't really know how much Darrell Henderson motivates this move, but it's not like they signed Javian Hawkins. They made a trade, gave up a pick that could be a 4th rounder for Sony Michel. So clearly it's some level of investment. And I think even if you're not sure of it, it's late enough in round 8 and the 32nd running back off the board. You look at everybody else that's left that you can at least talk yourself into the upside. If it's true that they don't believe in Darrell Henderson and the two of them begin the season at least splitting evenly, then you've got a usable guy with upside beyond that if Darrell Henderson gets hurt further, or if Sony Michel keeps running the way that he was last year when he was averaging 5.7 yards per carry.
I'm almost uncomfortable even commenting on it because, like, far be it from me. Who am I to question him? But I hated the trade for the Rams. I'll say that. Like, the Rams just burned their draft picks. And with cuts coming up this week, with what we've learned about value at running back, you're really trading anything for a guy with bad knees with 1 year left? Just, he's not even good. So I just don't like it.
I think that's the question on him at this point. He played well last year. He was good in yards after contact. He's looked pretty good in the preseason so far this year. The knees aren't good. He was a 1st-round pick just 3 years ago. So, I mean, I agree. The Rams clearly don't value draft picks the same way other teams in the league do. And as far as giving up a pick that could be a 4th rounder, I'm okay with that. I mean, clearly they are in win now mode. They just begged Detroit to give them Matthew Stafford and to take Jared Goff away. So clearly that's the path they're heading down. They're paying a bunch of money to a bunch of guys. So I can get behind it at that level. Like I said, it's not a matter of being all in on Sony Michel. It's just looking at him and saying, I can see the ceiling with him more so than the other running backs that are going to make it back.
Does that pick? We don't have to stay on this all night. Does that pick necessarily tell you that Jared likes what's coming up at running back, or that he doesn't like what's coming up at running back? Like, you could go to Michel and shoot for the ceiling in the way you're describing, like what's the best case scenario, and then other kind of RB, whatever we're at, like 40 or so into this draft, those guys coming up here in the next 5 to 10, is he thinking that I could have taken player X? If you want me to name a name, I will. Like, I could have taken player X at 8:02, but he's usually there at 9:11 or 10:02, so I'll just do that, and it's all the same, and I'll protect against somebody else shooting for Michel after the trade and the recent developments. I wonder what it says about how he thinks what we think will happen in the next 2 to 4 rounds.
I think if there's a running back that he really liked and that he expected to go somewhere around the 9-10 turn in ADP, he would have gone ahead and taken him instead of Michel at the beginning of 8. Because Jared's not a big fan of Sony Michel. I think that it's
he is now.
Yeah, he's going to have to be for the next year. So I'm going to have to tell him. I'm going to have to tell him every week that Sony Michel is too high in the running back rankings. But he's got 5 pass catchers already. He's now in the range where he's saying, I'm going to take a few shots at running back that I think have high ceilings, and I hope that 1 or 2 of them hit for me.
He is a Sony Michel. He's already ordered the jersey. That Mark Cohn walking to Memphis. Tell me, son, are you a Christian child? Ma'am, I am tonight. I mean, he is now on Team Sony Michel. So good luck.
I guarantee you he's not feeling good about it. This might be the night that Jared really starts drinking whiskey.
And there he is in the room. He's got the flask out.
So, but it's also interesting on the running back question. The team next to him has one running back so far, and it's A.J. Dillon. A.J. Dillon, we know, is not going to lead his team in carries unless Aaron Jones gets hurt. So, I mean, Jared and that drafter are probably in the same kind of boat, and really the Aaron Jones, Raheem Mostert team next to them too. I mean, Raheem Mostert is a similar player to Sony Michel here in that we're looking at a split backfield and we're all kind of guessing about how it's going to work. And it's definitely not somebody that you can just count on being able to start week after week.
Right. So can I name names?
Yeah, hit up.
He's got the two Tampa guys. If he wants to pick one for running back 3. And then you've got some rookie receivers, a couple with the same name, who we're not too far away from here. And if he's got favorites in that bunch, then he'll be fine. Like he can pick the running back first if he wants. He can go either way on that. But I think that's where we're at here. And, you know, it's good. He might have to figure out a different running back 2 in the end, but you know, he's got options.
And I think at this stage, you really need to be aware of what's on that team behind you. And, you know, if there is a running back that you are hoping to see around the turn, then go ahead and take him before the turn because you can't count on that guy getting back to you. You should expect the guy not to get back to you. So we did see A.J. Dillon, then Corey Davis before the Sony Michel pick. And Corey Davis is somebody we talked about with John Daigle last night and has been climbing up draft boards with Elijah Moore not practicing in recent weeks. Elijah Moore returned this week. So maybe we'll finally get a look at Corey Davis and Elijah Moore together for the first time in that third preseason game. But Corey Davis has seen 45% of Zach Wilson's targets if you include, you know, plays negated by penalty to this point. So it's looking good for Corey Davis in terms of his role in the offense, but we got to see what he looks like with Elijah Moore back. And I'm still not sure that I'm not sure. I'm not taking Corey Davis ahead of Elijah Moore is what I should say.
Me neither. And Moore just went. Doesn't Jared love Elijah Moore?
Oh yeah.
He's got a lot of him. So that's who I was thinking about there. But
yeah, well, and I think that he probably was thinking it would be nice if Elijah Moore gets to me here, but you can't expect him to get to the end of round 9 in these because that's right around his ADP in these drafts.
Still plenty of good options here. There goes Gordon. So he's got his choice of the Bucks, or he could do a few things at wide receiver. I mean, Callaway has jumped the line, and he's already gone in this thing.
Oh wow!
I'm thinking of Marvin Jones. I'm thinking about either Buck running back.
Yeah. So let's recap some of the players that came off the board. We talked about so that round 7. Leading up to the Dak Prescott pick, we had Laviska Shenault started off, then Will Fuller, Antonio Brown, Damian Harris, Devontae Smith, Deebo Samuel, Russell Wilson, Dallas Goedert, Aaron Rodgers, Raheem Mostert, Dak Prescott, A.J. Dillon, then Corey Davis to kick off round 8, Sony Michel, Tyler Higbee, Michael Gallup, Noah Fant, Brandon Cooks, Jalen Waddle, Michael Thomas, Robert Tonyan, Justin Herbert, Michael Carter, Zach Moss to finish round 8. And then round 9, Mecole Hardman, DJ Chark, Marquez Callaway, Jonnu Smith, Darnell Mooney, Irv Smith, Mike Gesicki, Elijah Moore, Curtis Samuel, Melvin Gordon. Then Jared took Jamal Williams. I think that's a fair spot for Jamal Williams. He's 33, 34, 35, 36, the running back off the board. I would have bet on Jared taking Jamal Williams over the Bucs running backs there.
You know him better than I do. I say pick one. I mean, whether it's Ronald Jones who just went or Fournette. I mean, I would pick one and ride. But again, I'm trying to remind everybody, like I'm humble about this. I'm new, and Matt and Jared have a lot more experience. I don't know what. There's Fournette. Okay,
there you go. So
he's put some running backs together there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the other side of pick one is if you don't have one that you're planting a flag with, then let somebody else pick one and take whoever gets to you. And I think maybe a month ago, it probably would have been Fournette. Maybe not probably. Leonard Fournette would have stood a better chance of being that pick instead of Jamal Williams. But now There's more Gio Bernard. We've seen him work on third down. It seems more like Gio Bernard is the leading candidate to be their third down back. So that takes away a lot of what looked like the PPR floor for Leonard Fournette. So he's definitely a riskier pick now than it seemed like a month ago, at least to me, and I believe pretty similar in Jared's mind there.
What do you think of, in general, Matt, the wide receiver options here in this range? I mean, if you're doing that wide receiver heavy build, then this is when you are either directly or indirectly, you're avoiding receivers. But I know there's a guy that Adam likes a lot who we've drafted in round 8, if not round 7, still sitting there from the Chargers. We have Rondale Moore did not go. Like, that's somebody I would want to be on here, I think. And you have other names in that same sort. Did I already mention Marvin Jones? They're all still sitting there. Like, I guess I'm asking you about 3 different guys, but how do you feel about what the landscape looks like, or those players individually, if you have a strong opinion?
I very much like Mike Williams, and I'm surprised that he did not get picked in this draft yet, considering that 2 Dolphins have already gone, Marquez Callaway's already gone, Mecole Hardman's already gone, Michael Thomas. I mean, the Michael Thomas drafter had 3 wideouts already, so I guess it's not overly reliant on Michael Thomas, but round 8 with Devontae Smith, Jerry Jeudy, and DK Metcalf ahead of him, that's too early for me for a guy that's going to be sitting out half the season, and then we don't know about Michael Thomas beyond that. So I thought that by this point Mike Williams would be moving up the board, and that he would be maybe let me try to see a good comp. I mean, I don't even know. I guess maybe where Cortland Sutton is right now, I would have expected that he would be up in that range by this point.
There he goes at 10:07. Yeah, I mean, there's an upside play for sure. We love the quarterback, new coach, lots to like about the Chargers, but that's the same every year. I mean, with whatever the circumstances are, people are usually high on them, but there is talent there for sure. Landry is interesting. Landry's kind of the opposite, where it's sort of boring, and I don't know. Landry, for me, it's funny that Landry and Kareem Hunt are on the same team, because I feel like they're both, to me, the same experience, where you at the draft, nobody's impressed. Nobody says good pick. Oh, I could have had upside through the roof, but I settled for, and Hunt is that kind of like that player at running back, but they're both very playable. And without knowing win rates, I bet a lot of people have won a lot of money with each of those guys.
Yeah, Kareem Hunt is somebody that has been, I don't know, I basically off my board this year, I guess, because he got a smaller share of things last year than I would have anticipated, and it shrank after Nick Chubb returned from his injury late in the season. So I'm wary of him where you have to get him. He went at an okay range here at the end of round 6. I don't know. I guess I'm just taking a wide receiver there and waiting until later for some of the running backs that, the group took down in that 8, 9, 10 range that we talked about already. Jarvis Landry, he's the kind of guy that at some point you have to shrug and take him and realize that you're getting fine value, because Jarvis Landry's never been terrible. He's not going to be terrible. He's not going to excite you when you're trying to win a big prize here, but there are going to be weeks where you're like, all right, I'll put Jarvis Landry in the lineup, and he catches 6 balls for 80 yards and a touchdown.
It's anecdotal, and I'm sure there are times when this wasn't true, but we all have our examples of that. We all have our feelings about certain players, and I'm telling you, whenever I've had Jarvis Landry, I look up at my scores running through the day, and he's just put up 20 points. Like, he is somebody. You look at his targets, 7 years in the league, never fewer than 101 targets. Last year, his fewest. I mean, he's not young anymore. He'll be 29 in November, but 3 or more touchdowns every year, 100 and more targets every year, 2 different teams. And that team is very stable from last year. People have their Donovan Peoples-Jones crushes and whatever they think they might do at tight end. I know you like Hooper a lot, but I think Landry is still pretty safe.
Especially when you're getting him just outside the 50th wide receiver. I mean, if you're saying I don't like Jarvis Landry as my wide receiver 3, that's fine. But if you're saying I don't like him at wide receiver 50, then that's the end of our conversation, because I don't have anything else to say.
Yeah, I would have liked that for Jared's team. I mean, if we can speak freely,
Oh yeah.
I would like to see one more of those greens be yellow.
Yeah,
Um,
I think after getting Jamal Williams behind Sony Michel, I probably would have passed on Leonard Fournette, especially with those wide receivers available, Pittman, Landry, or Mike Williams. I would have taken any of those three over Fournette and then just seen what got back to me at running back.
do you, since we are nitpicking a little bit, because that's what I mean, maybe we're here to do. 802 when he picked Michelle, there was Gallup. Now, where are you on Gallup? He's another one of these guys that every year people are hot for. Is there enough volume there, I guess, is the question. And here's Jared with Prescott. I wonder if he was close to Gallup.
I mean, it was probably in consideration. I could go either way. I mean, I'm not overly high on either of these two players. It's tough to get excited about the third wideout for any team, even if it is the Cowboys. So, I mean, I like Gallup, but I'm not opposed to Sony Michel because I see the ceiling that's there. And even if he doesn't pan out, I don't think that you're going to lose out on a special Michael Gallup season. There's just too much else in Dallas.
So we're into round 11. It's the second half. What are we trying to accomplish right now? Are you trying to find home runs, hidden gems? Are you trying to build depth? We get to the point here pretty soon where you're thinking about, or I would be, these are players I have to be willing to cut a week or two into the season. What are some of your swing thoughts at this point?
I will say that this is the range of the draft where the Draft Sharks draft war room automatically switches over to upside mode because, I mean, that's what you want to add. You have starters at this point, unless you're, employing some kind of oddball, and I don't say that in a bad way, but oddball just being different from what everybody else is doing strategy. You've got your starters. So what you want here is swinging for upside. I mean, that's what you want throughout the draft anyway. You want to draft players that are going to outscore their draft position. But here, I need a guy that I can see a path for, ultimate ceiling. And that's not always going to be the case because sometimes Jarvis Landry just makes more sense than somebody else that I find. But, I say Jarvis Landry is an example of not having that upside, but I have to call myself out on that because I think that's our problem with Jarvis Landry is we look at him and see somebody that doesn't have upside. But if Odell Beckham goes down again and the guy's coming off an ACL tear, then you've got the number one receiver for Cleveland. If Odell Beckham doesn't go down and Cleveland's just, let's say, better, moves the ball more, everybody is making out, especially the wide receiver 50 in this draft. And if Cleveland has Odell Beckham and doesn't win as many games, maybe it has to throw the ball a little bit more than it would have been comfortable doing, and you get more targets for Jarvis Landry. So, there are a variety of ways to find that upside path. You just need to be able to find an upside path, I think, at this stage in the draft.
Mm-hmm. There goes Rondale Moore. I mean, that is late. It's funny because rookies get inflated, and so it's funny to think of a rookie as like cheap when it has the helium of a guy like Rondale Moore. But that is a couple rounds late for him, and I don't know why. I think Christian Kirk could be interesting later. I've been drafting him. I feel like that offense has a lot of potential, and Kirk is almost free. You think that maybe we're talking tight end here?
Yeah, I could certainly see a tight end here, depending on who's left. And it's tough to gauge exactly who's on the board. But I mean, let's look at some of the tight ends that have gone after that Logan Thomas pick in round 6. There was only Goddard in round 7. We had 3 in round 8, 3 in round 9, just 1 in round 10. Evan Ingram, to me, is sliding further than he should. I think he should be right up with the guys that went in the previous round at tight end: Jonnu Smith, Irv Smith, Mike Gesicki, and then Adam Troutman, Gerald Everett in round 11. So what do you think, Mike? Mr. Bare Knuckles, what's in your mind for the next couple picks?
Komet.
I can tell you it's not going to be Komet to Jared's team.
Okay. Well, Troutman's coming off an injury. I don't think if we're drafting Michelle, are we to Jawan Johnson? I wouldn't be.
Yeah, I think it's a little too early for that.
He's probably fine not picking it on the way down with 2 tight ends behind him. But Devontae Parker, I do like that. There's a lot of potential there, and Miami is a team that people are sort of reflex-wise, they're down on. So I think Parker could be a good floor, not exactly like Landry, but somebody who could just be solid The question becomes, when do you start a guy like that? And you're not going to start him week one on the team, probably on the team that Jared is building. But I like that pick. He doesn't like Komet, so Ferkser is somebody I think. I'm not going to look. Ferkser is maybe right here.
I know that he does not like Rob Gronkowski. I think it's a fair level for Gronk, though.
I would not do that either. I agree. Hooper it's a little early, but I like that thinking on him.
And I think Hooper's the kind of guy who could look like he's too early right now, and then by the end of the season, it could be like, oh, I should have taken Austin Hooper at that point.
Yeah, Komet would be my pick here, but he doesn't like him, so where are we on Devin? Oh, there goes Singletary. He's already picked 4 running backs, though. He's out of that game, I think. Backup quarterback, no. Bateman is hurt. Bateman is interesting. Like, if he were a little deeper at receiver, then I think you could. It's the Michael Thomas argument a little bit. Like, you should have take your chance on Bateman and then hold on. And we're early enough in the draft where we're not cutting these guys quite yet. Bryan Edwards.
So it's the right path with the upside wide receiver. He just took the one that's healthy right now. And I mean, I think that this is far enough into the draft to take Bryan Edwards. I don't think any of us is like, it's definitely the year for Bryan Edwards because he did nothing last year. But John Gruden is sure excited about what Bryan Edwards has this year. And in round 12, a team with no real number one wideout, why not take a shot? That's what I'm talking about with somebody where you can build the path in your mind for his ultimate upside.
Now, Ruggs is still up. Would you be Edwards over Ruggs?
Yeah, I feel better about Bryan Edwards than Henry Ruggs right now. I'm not sure that I would go ahead and take Edwards with Ruggs on the board. I might just wait and see what happens. But I also don't have the list of players in front of me to know exactly what else Jared would be considering. I do know that Bryan Edwards is a player that jumps up the board when you switch over to upside mode in your draft war room on Draft Sharks.
Look at Tony Jones.
Yeah.
Tony Jones, ESPN said on Monday night that Sean Payton said he was their number 2 running back at that time. His father played arena ball in Buffalo, which does not factor into his value in this draft.
But in our hearts.
Is he Latavius Murray? I mean, that's what we're doing. Latavius Murray slides because of that. And he's another running back that I think later on you could get to because of that report. Who knows at this point? Next week, rosters will look a lot different. We'll know a lot more.
Yeah, Tony Jones is Latavius Murray in this draft, at least. I don't know what to make of it. We'll see, because this time last year, nobody but you thought that James Robinson was a thing in Jacksonville.
I read that. I'm not doing anything actionable without finding it from other smart people first, but it was weird because I felt like Robinson was a score for me. But then I got into industry drafts like Draft Sharks Invitational and Pros versus Joes. And even in 25 rounds or whatever that was, I was like, I've had enough James Robinson. No one else had drafted him once. And I was tapped out. So I don't know. We talked to Pete Overzet a couple times and he drafted Mike Davis in the same round. And like, yeah, that was the key. Like, damn. Robinson would have been even better for me, but yeah, that was my first year doing that, and this year, I guess if I had the equivalent guy, I would just keep going because the hit rate is so low in those low rounds. You might as well just take your best shot. Kylan Hill is who I went with in Draft Sharks this year. That way,
we talked to this about this with Dwayne McFarland on the podcast last week. In the first 5 or 6 rounds, I don't remember exactly what he said his cutoff was, but the first 5 or 6 rounds is where I think it's okay, and where we were talking about it being okay to say, I've got enough of this guy. I've got enough of this guy. I'm going to move on to something else. I don't want to rely too heavily on anything or target specific players every single time. But beyond that point, in the range where you're talking about James Robinson, I mean, it's okay to take the same guy every single time in round 15 if you want. Because if that guy doesn't work out at all, then all you're out is a 15th round pick.
Mm-hmm. Well, live and learn.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what we're all trying to do, and that's kind of the point of doing these draft streams, I think. Tony Jones, so you talked about how you read something about James Robinson. That's what we're all doing at this time of year. I mean, whether it's reading something or watching the games and feeling like you see something, it's something. And there's so much out there. There are so many writers per team. There are so many outlets where you can read things, whether it be what's going on in practices or, stats from all the really smart people now doing fantasy football content. There are lots of different things, and even within the same team, you can read big things about different players. So, we're all trying to land on the guys that have the ultimate upside. We're all gonna get some wrong. We're all gonna get some right. It's about taking as many upside chances down in this range as you can. And I think this round, right before Tony Jones, we had Rashad Penny, who had generated some positive press recently with Pete Carroll even talking about how good he looked. And then just today, I read Greg Rosenthal from NFL.com saying that Rashad Penny could be a trade or even a cut candidate coming up at the end of this summer.
Trade would be great. Cut would be bad. I mean, big difference. But yeah, if he's being phased out, it's been a kind of a lost career there, sadly for him. Well, every one of those little things you're talking about with varying degrees of credibility is the potential for an edge. And Adam and I on the deep end with Abib on Tuesday, one of the first things he said, Matt, was like, yeah, I'm not drafting anymore. Or I'm not drafting very much. Like, well, what do you mean? Everybody's drafting now. And he said paraphrasing, he said he thought his edge had been reduced because all those wide receivers he wanted were being taken earlier. So, he has the discipline, I guess, to stand off, and, good for him. So an edge can manifest all kinds of different ways. You read a report, you watch a game like you're describing, you see certain things, you're like, okay, this is actionable. I'm going to go in tonight. And that's very sexy. If you can sort of have the bankroll underneath you and then you see a thing and you can just jump in, the industry now allows for you to draft anywhere, anytime, any amount of money. People are waiting for you. It's like you're just on the Vegas Strip constantly. Even slow, if you want to do it tonight or you want to take it 6 weeks, like whatever. And that really is awesome and really does set you up, if you have that kind of discipline and awareness, to really, really do well. Mm-hmm. So I feel like within the next 5 years, I will figure that out and act on it. Before then, I'll just be drafting whenever, I have a beer and feel like I'm bored. But his way, that's a pretty good way to look at it.
Yeah, and when you're truly bored, you just come in here and watch other people draft and talk about what they're doing.
Yes. We got a ball game going on behind me in my yard, which is awesome.
Nice. It's good to mix sounds of summer in with the drafting.
It's getting late, but we can like if an NFL game or a baseball game gets too lopsided, we can just switch coverage over to that.
Yeah, there you go.
We can shift it over to their game.
Yeah, if somebody starts killing this draft a little too much, we'll go.
We're going to move the national audience to a kickball game in my front yard.
So Jared and I were talking about the quarterbacks falling in these drafts on Monday night, and it's happening again here. Justin Herbert was the 8th quarterback off the board in round 8. Then we had 2 full rounds go by with no more quarterbacks. Round 11, we had 2. Ryan Tannehill first off the board, despite being on the COVID list right now. I guess that's probably not a factor for the regular season, but round 11, second pick, Ryan Tannehill. Tom Brady, 3 picks later. Then the next round, we got Jalen Hurts going in round 11. Mike, it seems to me like if you're aware of these quarterbacks sliding in the draft, you can use that to your advantage, whether that be getting Dak Prescott later than you thought you might have to go to get him, or knowing that you can wait and take a quarterback as late as round 12 or even later.
Yeah, that's right. The only way you probably get stuck is if you drafted one among the top 5 or so. And I don't know how Jared feels. We'll see. I mean, there still is Justin Fields potential here. He's got 2 teams in front of him who only have 1. So that could change. But if you go early, then you just feel like you don't want to do that. Team 1, as I look at it, is the only team without any quarterbacks yet. I like Cousins for the early schedule with a rookie. I think there goes Fields. Sorry. Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, Prescott today Matt, he was full go, like no pitch count or anything like that. So maybe it's wheels up for Dak Prescott, and you just keep pounding to their positions. We don't have that second tight end yet, and we still don't like Kmet, right?
I would be okay with Kmet going here. I know that Jared doesn't particularly like him, so I'll be surprised if he takes him. But maybe it'll get to the point where he says, all right, fine, I'll take Cole Kmet just so Michael stop talking about him.
You could go Ebron. You could go Hayden Hurst if you like the idea of him playing a lot with Pitts out wide. There are a few players here that are pretty much the same. We both like Hooper. You do, right? I'm remembering that right?
Yeah, so there goes Bateman, who you mentioned at his previous turn. And I'm a little surprised. I like Bateman here. I'm a little surprised that Jared took him because I was kind of talking him up earlier before the injury, and Jared was like, man, doesn't really do it for me this year. I like him long term, but we'll see. So I think it's just a matter of, at this point, the ultimate upside with him is greater than the rest of the guys on the board. I'm a little surprised, though, that he came off ahead of Emmanuel Sanders. I think it's a tight end at this pick, though, before we move on from Jared's round 14 selection. I would bet
Hooper.
And I don't mind saying it because if Jared doesn't pick him here, you can't expect him to get back to him. Hunter Henry.
Fine.
And that's fine. He has said recently that he thinks both Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry are values. And I think when you have TJ Hawkinson as the starter here, you don't need Hunter Henry to be ready at the start of the season. So why not buy a receiver in that New England offense where there is no clear number one?
And he still has some chance of being ready for that first game. We don't know exactly how that's going to look. They did just pick up Waring off waivers, right? New England, like they can't quit. They drafted 2 tight ends last year and then signed Smith and Henry, and now they're picking up Waring, who's not like a big deal, but still it's somebody. Just who knows with them. But that's good value, no doubt about it. That's a smart idea there. I like Bateman for him too. I'm glad to see that. Right.
If you are a tight end without employment, you should go to visit the Patriots before you go to the unemployment office, because most likely they're going to find something for you to do.
Truer words. That is right. He didn't get Fields. You think he would have wanted Fields?
I think Fields might have been in the mix. I think that he's probably not taking another quarterback. I think it's at the point where he could, if we get to a point where he just feels good about where he's at running back and wide receiver. But I would bet that his primary thought is not to take a second quarterback.
You think 14 takes a kick, or this team 5 from the back, team 8 takes a kicker here, having taken Washington defense last time, because
I hope so.
They're out of ideas and like, all right, so that's fine. I mean, take the best defense as you see it, take the best kicker, try that.
I hope that's the case. I'm never going to be the team that takes the first defense off the board, no matter when it is or what it is.
I agree, but I think with kicker, I do look at kicker different than defense.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are kickers who stay up top. The right offense, a guy like Tucker or Butker, those guys are pretty solid. And, all right, Gabriel Davis, fine. But you do see, when you're at this point of the draft, these skill position guys are largely the same. Like, your chances of success here are not too different, round 13 to 16, 15 to 18. So if you want to lock in kicker here, I don't hate you for it.
Yeah. I would be more okay with taking the first kicker than the first defense because, as you said, there are guys who sit up at the top year over year. There's also guys that you can count on not getting cut. And, it's not difficult to find a replacement kicker if your kicker gets cut. But if you're playing a bunch of leagues, it would be nice to not have to worry about something like that. You can just cross off a position that you won't have to worry about when it comes to waiver runs every week.
That's right. And you also have to worry about injuries. Last year, it seemed we had just kickers go down. If they go down this weekend, who was it a couple days ago? Tennessee or no? Somebody went on. This is the big area for me. This is on the plane going to Vegas for the bare knuckle is kicker depth. But if somebody goes down this week, they're on IR, they're done, they're replaced. I mean, that's it. So in all these best ball drafts we've been doing with kickers involved, you have to dodge that. You have to get to September 1st. Then after that, maybe there can be settlements with kickers, but we've talked about kickers for too long. It's just, you can get stuck with an injury because I think teams are just like, okay, goodbye at that point. The Colts just settled on a guy. Tennessee settled on a guy. It just makes me want just a little bit more reason, I would say, to get with those very top guys, like top 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm. And we just saw our second defense go off the board. But let's go back to those teams at the end of the draft with Jared sandwiched in the middle that started the draft without many running backs right next to Jared's team. So I guess before we get away from Jared's team, we had following the Sony Michel, Jamal Williams, Leonard Fournette pick, he took the 3 wideouts we talked about, Hunter Henry as his second tight end. The team at the turn started out with 2 wideouts, tight end, wideout, quarterback, tight end, and then it's been 6 running backs among the ensuing 8 picks with A.J. Dillon, then Corey Davis, Ronald Jones, Tony Pollard, Devin Singletary, Rashad Penny, Emmanuel Sanders, Darrell Williams. Now, to me, Tony Pollard is the guy that I'm never going to pick in a draft because I don't want running backs that are going to sit on my bench and do absolutely nothing until somebody gets hurt. Darrell Williams is in the same kind of boat, but it's at least 4 rounds later than Tony Pollard. A.J. Dillon is not, to me, that guy because he's going to be sharing the work to some degree with Aaron Jones. So I can use him en route to realizing the upside. But Tony Pollard's just a 0 share player for me.
Okay. Well, I don't know. Like Elliott, there's all kinds of reasons to like him. He goes 6th overall tonight. I mean, he is not that old. He got paid. The offense is great. Elliott makes sense where he goes, middle of first round in drafts. I just feel like Pollard is probably better. So if they didn't have Mike McCarthy, they had somebody more like, I don't want to give McVay too much credit, but somebody different. Maybe the new Charger coach. Then I could see like a more optimal employment sort of future, but not with Dallas, not with McCarthy. So Pollard is really more for in case, of emergency, I have to say. But I love the idea. Singletary is interesting, Matt. I mean, Singletary on that same roster, he's done well in the preseason. He's been provably good, breaking tackles, the kind of player that he is. You just don't have any goal line potential at all. And you have Moss and even Breida if you want. So Singletary is kind of easy to figure out, but still it doesn't leave you in a place where you have to, force your way to him, obviously.
Well, and so just before we get too far from Pollard, I'll say that even though I'm not drafting him, I can see the case for him in that ultimate ceiling. If Dallas does need to break the glass and pull him out, he's a high upside player. He could be a league-winning player. Now, where I think that makes sense is if you took a couple of early running backs, not one of those being Zeke Elliott, and then you take Tony Pollard at that level. So you're not expecting to use him at all unless something happens to Zeke Elliott. You've got 2 guys that you're starting every week, and Pollard can just sit there and occupy a space. That's where I think that kind of player makes sense for this particular build. I mean, this team is going to need to start 2 running backs at least every week, and I'm not high on the options that they have. I would rather take somebody that's going to contribute more.
Do you feel like Dillon is shaky right now too? Kylan Hill has had a lot of positive press.
I mean, I think any running back from that range on is you have to call shaky. I don't think that Kylan Hill is going to take A.J. Dillon's touches away, but certainly I don't look at that team and think I know that I can start these 2 guys in week 1. I'm not sure how things are going to go. And, that's part of the build is you embrace that unknown.
The chaos. That's right.
Yeah, right
so
now,
if you look at that team, what's the one pick above all you would have done differently?
Logan Thomas, and it would be
Javonte.
Yeah, either Javonte Williams or Trey Sermon, whoever you like better between them. But probably Javonte Williams would be my pick between those 2 at this point.
Yeah.
And then the other team on the other side of Jared going back that way, so took Aaron Jones first, but then 5 straight wideouts like we mentioned, and then Raheem Mostert, Tyler Higbee, Melvin Gordon, James Conner, Naheem Hines, Jalen Hurts, Justin Fields, Darrington Evans. Hurts-Fields was an interesting pair of picks, as you said, when Fields came off the board. I like that because Hurts, we know, is starting week 1, unless something goofy happens in Philadelphia. He has high upside whenever he's on the field. A little bit shaky. He's probably going to have some rough weeks. Justin Fields, as soon as he hits the field, is going to be Jalen Hurts plus passing, I think, and plus a true number 1 receiver ready to go. Maybe Devontae Smith is that guy for Hurts, but we already know that Allen Robinson is that guy for Fields. So I don't know. Over here, I'm just, crossing off days on my Justin Fields calendar, waiting for when Christmas gets here.
It will not be week 1 of the 3 rookies who were not assumed to be playing week 1. Fields is the one I think we would have the least confidence in to play in that game. Like, he is so staunchly on Dalton. Lance, maybe, and Mac Jones, maybe. You think Jared's going to want a second quarterback? You said no, right?
Yeah, I don't think that he wants one. I think that there's always a chance that he takes one if there's somebody there that he just thinks should not go undrafted, but I don't think he's taking a second one. And by the way, our pal Gilds appears to think that Jared's having a good draft here.
I mean, that I defer to him. Ask Gilds if Lopez for the Royals has a stolen base yet. Is it Nicky Lopez? Does he have a stolen base yet tonight? I need to know.
I will not
they're playing late.
Our football draft stream with questions about baseball.
They're playing late. Maybe Gallen is pitching tonight too. Another one of his guys. Did a kicker just go? I would take Butker if I'm Jared. Did he just go?
Yeah, Butker just went around that turn.
MVS. He loves MVS, right?
You missed, by the way, while we were talking, you missed Cole Kmet coming off the board too. So let's flip to the other end of this draft because it was the Christian McCaffrey team, also the team that waited the longest at quarterback. So just to recap the draft for that team, McCaffrey first, then Kittle McLaurin at the 2-3 turn, James Robinson, Brandon Ayuk at the 4-5, Kareem Hunt, Laviska Shenault, 6-7, Zach Moss, Mecole Hardman, 8-9, Philip Lindsay, Adam Troutman, 10-11, Russell Gage, Chuba Hubbard, 12-13. So there's an example of a team taking the handcuff for its stud back, Chuba Hubbard behind Christian McCaffrey. And then Cole Kmet, Trevor Lawrence at the 14-15 turn. I say if you're waiting all the way until the 14-15 turn to take a quarterback, you did well to get Trevor Lawrence, especially already having a mid-round Jaguars receiver with him.
Me too. And I would take Cousins next and just start him for the first 3 games because the matchups are good. And maybe you find out that way what Lawrence is and move on. He's not the only one you could do that with either. Fitzpatrick would be somebody here, right? We don't see his name yet.
Yeah, and Sam Darnold's another guy that John Daigle pointed out on our podcast yesterday has an excellent season starting schedule. I want to say the first 6 games are all against soft pass defenses.
Starting with the Jets.
Mm-hmm.
MVS over Cobb. So Jared's big on MVS.
Yeah.
Is Cobb like sort of a non-story since he was acquired? Have you heard anything?
I haven't heard anything. Jared tracks that stuff closer than I do, to be honest. I have not heard anything. And really, I think between them, it's just a matter of betting on the higher ADOT guy and the guy that's been generating buzz. Valdez-Scantling has showed us the ceiling. If he can just become more if he can get more volume on a regular basis, I mean, he could – maybe the upside goes into wide receiver 3 range. I'm not sure.
Yeah, Cobb, you want to see like 4-yard touchdown passes, but Adams is so good down there, and so is Jones. Like, I don't know. We'll see if Cobb has any relevance in the end because it's been years, and they have that stuff figured out. Kirk, I like Kirk. That's 1609, and I think there's upside there. That's a good player who, with Larry Fitzgerald's presence and some weird coaching, has really not just sort of hit it yet, but I like that. I know Rondale Moore, but I like Kirk a lot for that round.
I think that there's a lot of anti-AJ Green. I think he's getting the targets when he's on the field, but the big risk with AJ Green is there's a solid chance he's not on the field, and I think if he's not on the field, Christian Kirk is stepping into that role. So an AJ Green injury would open up targets for Christian Kirk, and maybe he doesn't have the upside that Rondale Moore has as a player, but he's also 5 rounds behind him in this draft. So you're not investing anything to get him.
Carlos Hyde. Wow. Let's see some kickers.
Well, since we're talking nicely about Jared, let me go back and say that I'm not going to tell anybody they made a mistake in round 15, but Salvin Ahmed would have been Justin Jackson for me. Okay.
I have more Joshua Kelly. I mean, Kelly I still think is good, but I can't ever find evidence of it. Like when he plays last year, it just was not impressive at all. So, I guess it's sort of tilting toward Jackson a little bit, but there should be some value in that role. I think Anthony McFarland is interesting now with his seeming to be the number 2 in Pittsburgh behind Najee Harris. Harris should dominate the usage there. But maybe Breida is interesting now when we're talking running backs at this point. Breida is fast, and we know the Bills wanted some of that on their team. I think Breida could dress for games And if he dresses for games, he's not going to cover kicks. Like he'll have some role in the offense if he does, especially if they have 3 or 4 receivers suspended for a month during the season because they didn't get vaccinated, and then they have to get creative on offense. And by the way, I'm not, being completely serious because I don't really expect that to happen, but Dawson Knox never gets picked. And, he was going behind Tebow a month ago before Tebow got cut. He goes after guys like Ebron and Hurst and, just like that's a great offense, Matt. I mean, he drops the ball, but they still throw it to him.
Right. Yeah, we don't care about drops at receiver. We probably shouldn't care about drops too much at tight end. It's definitely why not range. And when I talk about finding a path, that's the path. Is he's still probably the top tight end in what should be one of the better offenses in the league and one that suddenly went pass heavy last year. So, yeah, it's certainly a range where Dawson Knox makes plenty of sense. By the way, another guy who makes, I think, more sense than where he's getting drafted still is Tevin Coleman. I mean, the downside with Michael Carter is that the Jets are clearly not committing to him, and yet he's still the one going in round 8 here, and Tevin Coleman's 7 rounds behind him, and Ty Johnson has not come off the board yet. I mean, right. At best for Michael Carter, he's in a committee with those 2 guys, and at worst, he's not, and he's playing less than those 2 guys.
Yeah, Ty Johnson should be any minute here. I mean, that should happen. There goes McFarland. Boston Scott, okay. Very disappointing kicker draft. Not a lot of action here. If I'm Jared, I'm on Bass or Koo if I get the chance.
Jared's kicking the table right now that he didn't get Justin Tucker in this round.
I bet. I like Gainwell. That has potential too. I mean, 5th round pick. We'll see if the NFL has recalibrated based on draft capital. You don't see running backs going as often early. So maybe a 4th or 5th round guy now is the equivalent to a 2nd or 3rd round guy 10 years ago and still really does have some importance in on a roster. Like they're still easily cut. But I feel like Gainwell and Michael Carter are 2 examples of good players who were picked later than they would have been in the past. And, are both on teams where there should be room. There's
Jared was listening to you.
Yeah. He hasn't stopped by yet. Is he going to be on post game or is he going to come by here before round 20?
He's probably going to come in soon now that he took Ty Johnson after you said that he needed to come off the board.
Yeah, he did, though. He did. I mean, you can't start him, but maybe in week 6 or 7, you're going to get to a point where you want to. This should be Tyler Bass.
I bet it's not. I bet he waits till another round.
I bet it's not.
No, different defense the last 2 rounds.
It's a pride thing. You can't be you can't be taking kickers before it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah, you got to watch out for your street cred on these streets.
Right. Well, let's see. Can we tab this pick?
I honestly have no idea. I haven't been getting my bare knuckles ready for round 18 yet.
Diami Brown. Okay.
Well, you know what? That's one I should have gotten because we're at the point where 6 defenses were off the board, and you're trying to get somebody that starts the season with a good schedule, and that's Denver. He and I have talked about Denver. They have a good first 3 games to open the year. They're a defense that you should be able to start for 3 weeks, and then you'll see beyond that.
That's fine. They're at the Giants the first week. Bridgewater, by the way, could be an interesting last-minute quarterback. He's going to start. But Diami Brown, I mean, he's nice. I think the team has potential, and I would want to be on him here if I didn't already have 9 receivers.
All right. We are going to bring Jared on now so that we can ask him the questions that we've been wondering about to this point. Jared, we're enjoying the team that you're putting together and enjoying watching the draft that you're taking part in. You having a good time tonight?
I was having a great time through round 4, and then things got a little hairy. But I don't know. I think the team has a shot, which is kind of all you can ask for in this kind of format.
Round 4. So 5 Anderson, 6 Boyd. I thought you'd be excited there.
I like both those guys a lot. Looking back on it, in hindsight, it's always 20/20 in these drafts. But I think I probably should have taken one of those wideouts and then either Mike Davis or Chase Edmonds. I don't love taking those running backs, but I just think getting one of those guys, and then I could have taken Corey Davis or an Elijah Moore at the next turn, and I just don't see much of a downgrade from Boyd to those guys. So that's kind of the 2 picks I'd have back if I could. But yeah, I'm not complaining. I think I'm strong at wide receiver. If Dak's healthy, I'm strong there. Hawkinson, I'm strong at tight end. So obviously running back is what I have to figure out. But I have some options, and we have the waiver wire to work with.
In round 7, where you took Dak, was there any thought of not taking the quarterback there since the drafter behind you already had Kyler Murray?
No, I wanted to just make sure I locked up Dak. People do weird things in these drafts. I've seen guys take 2 of those elite quarterbacks, and there was honestly no one else I was like I had to have. So I was like, let me just make sure I get Dak because I think there's a pretty big drop of a quarterback behind him.
Mm-hmm.
Sony Michel, we talked about that more than any other pick tonight. What was on your mind at the beginning of the night with respect to Michel?
Yeah, I knew he was going to be a target for me. Maybe if I wasn't so light at running back, I would have waited one more turn to see if he made it back to me. Yeah. But having just one running back through that point, I just want to take a shot on the upside. Like I believe in that offense. I believe in McVay's system. Michel, when he's healthy, I still think he's a good running back and maybe a better running back than Darrell Henderson. So it's really just an upside play.
What does the upside look like? Is it? It's not even really Akers because it can't be Akers anyway. But that was only a partial season. Who is the upside? Whether it's on another team, is it Montgomery? Like what does the upside look like?
Yeah, I think he could outscore Montgomery. I think the upside is he's the lead everything in that backfield. He's the lead ball carrier. He's the lead pass catcher, and he's the goal line guy.
From week 1?
No, probably not week 1. And that's what tripped me up a bit because Saquon is obviously a question mark for week 1 and probably going to be limited. Michelle is probably not usable week 1, so I might be rolling out one of Williams or Fournette there. Early season running back is going to be a problem. I'm gonna need the rest of my positions to carry me. But again, I think I have some options here at running back where 1 or 2 of these guys could emerge, and then hopefully I can pounce on something on the waiver wire.
I think Jamal Williams is probably a week 1 starter for you here.
Yeah, especially if we hear that DeAndre Swift is going to be limited or out.
Will you take one more?
I got a few guys queued up. I'm thinking about it. The other consideration is, do I want to add a second quarterback, or do I want to just wait till Dak's by and work the waiver wire? So yeah, those are kind of my 2 options outside of my kicker.
Is there any possibility you could take a running back at 19-11, not to be confused with the awesome Orchard out southwest of Syracuse, 1911 Beacon Skiff, Lafayette, New York, not to be confused with that? Is there any chance you could take a running back at 19-11 and start him week 1?
Oh man, you tell me. If you see someone still sitting there that I could start week 1, let me know. I don't.
Who would it be that you would have that kind of confidence? Like Breida is somebody who could be relevant. We'll have lots of cuts in a week. Sure. It could look a lot different. What about Hawkins in Tennessee after he was picked up today? What does that signify? Is that somebody who you feel like Tennessee is just gambling, or does he have importance to them?
Yeah, I think he's probably worse than 50-50 to make their final. If he couldn't make the Falcons, running back room, I'm not sure he's going to make Tennessee. So he's not really on my radar here.
You are
Matt Diami Brown right there.
Okay. To the same team that took Jarrett Patterson the turn before. So we've got and the Washington defense. So either we have a homer or somebody who just became a homer.
All right. So I am going to take a running back. I'm going to take this guy just because I love him and it's kind of fun. He obviously needs at least one thing to happen to get into the
Yes.
mix. Yeah. So
he's got one thing for sure in his favor. He's actually good.
Next.
Yeah, I think A.J. Dillon's good too, but I think Kylan Hill is definitely better in the passing game. So if something happened to Jones, I think Hill would at least play a role in that passing game.
I think Kylan Hill is more so good in the way that it's good to be good at running back in the NFL right now. A.J. Dillon is a good player, but he's like a Derrick Henry style player that's not Derrick Henry because nobody is Derrick Henry. And Kylan Hill, could be what Jamal Williams was for the Packers. I don't think he's a truly high ceiling player, but he's the kind of guy who could be regularly involved. And frankly, he was drafted not that far from where the Packers drafted Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones was a day 3 running back for him too. So, we try to not get too excited about any players, even if it's somebody that we did like as a prospect. But, there are some guys who turn day 3 draft capital into serious NFL production.
Yeah, and like I always say, I'm gonna end up cutting half of these picks from like round 12 on. So it's just sort of, grab some guys with upside, see what happens, and if Hill or Ty Johnson or Salvon Ahmed will probably be my first cut when we get into the week 1 waiver wire.
You're definitely not cutting. You're not cutting Bateman. Like you got to hang in there for at least 6 weeks.
Yeah. But again, that's an upside pick. Like, we have Cole Beasley projected well ahead of Rashad Bateman. But like with my wide receiver core, I don't think I'd use Cole Beasley. Maybe on a bye week or 2. But I'd much rather take a shot that Bateman becomes the clear 1 in Baltimore, and as someone who maybe is in the mix with like Tyler Boyd and Robbie Anderson, where I'm deciding between those guys over the second half of the season.
We're almost to the end of this draft, so we'll be jumping off the stream soon. But before we do, Jared, I wanted to ask you about a couple of specific player situations. Leonard Fournette in round 10, I certainly think it's late enough that he's fine. But was there any thought of taking somebody else, given what we've seen Gio Bernard carve out in the preseason so far?
Yes, I was considering Connor there, and I was considering Gus Edwards, who almost made it back to me in the 11th. That would have been a tough decision. I kind of didn't want to take like 4 straight running backs there, but I probably would have had to take Gus if he made it back to be in the 11th. I went Fournette there again, kind of as I've been saying all offseason. Like I still think he has the highest ultimate ceiling. Like, and I totally believe Bernard is at least going to open the season in a pass catching role. But like if Bernard or Ronald Jones go down, I think Fournette's a guy you could be using as a weekly fantasy starter.
Mm-hmm. And then Brian Edwards versus Henry Ruggs was something Mike pointed out. You took Edwards with Ruggs still on the board. Is Edwards just ahead of Ruggs for you any time now?
Yeah, they're certainly close. And I considered going Ruggs just to see if Edwards would make it back to me. But man, I believe in Edwards more as a player than I do Henry Ruggs. That's basically what it came down to.
Can I just predict Amari Rodgers is Mr. Irrelevant? Just trying to warm up for bare knuckle 2 weeks from right now.
You're pretty good at
just throwing out some names. Got to be a receiver there.
Marquez Valdez-Scantling, by the way, he needs to be going higher in drafts. Like there is we talk about the drumbeat, Sigmund Bloom, consistent drumbeat out of Green Bay that, he looks like he's taken a big step. Aaron Rodgers has talked him up multiple times this offseason as well. So, and there's definitely room for another guy there to be fantasy relevant.
Well, so you say that, but should you have taken him instead of Salvon Ahmed or Rashad Bateman?
MVS, he might have dropped another round if I had passed on him. I was willing to gamble because he goes this late or later in most drafts.
Mm-hmm.
Were you watching our show as you drafted?
No, I had to have silence.
Complete silence. So what are you in, like an office?
Yeah, I'm in the office, which is my basement.
Basement doors locked.
It doesn't have a lock on it. It would be if there was, but it's closed.
It will in a couple years when his daughter is actually walking around.
Tall enough to reach the door handle.
That's right.
We got to see who this is. Not even close. Come on. That's awful. James, what are you going to do with that?
Yeah.
Third quarterback, too.
Yeah.
Amari Rodgers on the waivers.
I got to say, my biggest regret in this draft is not getting one of my Moors, either Elijah or Rondell. I kind of just missed him, by 3-4 picks.
You had the chance. We were talking a lot about them, I didn't want to name anybody. I didn't know if that was like a party foul, but 9-10. Yeah. Rondale Moore, that's 2 rounds late, Jared. Like 11-6 or whatever that is. That's a slip for him.
Yeah, honestly, I love him. I think that's about right for him. Okay. I would have taken Elijah Moore if he had made it to me at that 9-10 turn, and then I would have taken Rondell if he had made it to me at that 11-12 turn. But again, I missed by 3 or 4 picks on both of them.
Yeah, and I could see Rondale Moore in that 11-12 range. If you had taken him with Michael Pittman, Jarvis Landry, Mike Williams still on the board, I would have been making fun of you.
Yep. Yes. Yeah. I prefer all three of those guys over Rondell Moore.
All right. Well, this draft is wrapped up. Jared, thank you for coming on to talk about your picks and letting us ask you the questions that we've been pondering while watching you make these picks. Mike, thanks for sitting in on this draft with me.
My pleasure. It was really fun. I'm being just completely attacked by bugs sitting outside tonight, but it's, temperatures in the 80s as Western New York is known for, and it's been really fun to watch and talk. Thank you, Matt.
Jared probably wishes he was with you because there was kickball going on behind him, Jared.
Oh yeah,
there was. It got a little dark.
For kickball. I'd rather be in my basement. I'd rather be in my basement and air conditioning, drafting a main event team.
Too hot for kickball has never been said.
Oh, that's how you can tell Jared's getting old. It's too hot for kickball, and I think he's calling young players whippersnappers at this point.
I agree.
All right. Well, thank you folks for joining us and watching the stream. We'll certainly be watching Jared's team this year to see if he can finish second behind me in the main event for the FFPC. Head over to draftsharks.com. You can see where we rank all of these players that Jared picked and all the guys that went around him tonight and see how we think that you should draft your team. Set up your draft war room. We'll help guide you through any draft. Read all the strategy articles that are up on the site now. They're going to keep coming right up until the end of draft season, and the regular season is approaching. So if you haven't become a DS Insider, do so now. You're running out of time. We want you. We're ready for you. Join the free Draft Sharks Discord if you want like a little taste before you make the full jump into the DS Insider status. For Mike Shope, Jared Smolla, the rest of the Draft Sharks crew, I'm Matt Schaus saying thanks so much for swimming with us.